Welcome to the Feminine Principle podcast, supporting women to let go of the ghosts from their past by exploring the hidden side of their female psyche with shamanic shadow work for women, with your host, Nicola Lucy. Hello ladies, and welcome to this episode of the Feminine Principle podcast, where today we are exploring the fragmented soul and shadow work. And so I invite you just for a moment to imagine yourself back in the womb, being back in the waters of the womb of the mother. For it is here in this womb space where you are connected to source energy. Some may say that you're connected back to that great cosmic mother of the great cosmic womb. For it is here there is no separation, there's no division, there's no ego, there's no demanding of our needs to be met, there's no manipulation, no emotions. There is nothing except pure consciousness. Pure consciousness that has no limitations. It's endless, it's infinite, and it's love. It's pure, unconditional love. And this is ultimately the soul. The soul which has come from many lifetimes before, and therefore it carries with it an imprint of knowledge and wisdom and gifts that we've retrieved throughout the years, throughout the lifetimes, throughout the generations and the bloodlines and the spiritual lines. But in this moment, in the womb, it's just pure source energy. And so the journey begins when we separate. And it's from the moment of birth that first separation happens that it is said that we become or we experience our first fragmentation of the soul. This is the first moment in which our soul becomes fragmented. For it is always in the separation from our true unconditional nature where fragmentation happens. And so the point of birth is where it begins in this human journey, in our lifetime, with this mother, with this family, with this environment that we will now grow up in. And as we begin to grow up and we rely on everybody else to get our own needs met, to allow for our survival, our continued survival, we need everybody else around us. However, it is everybody else around us who is teaching us how to be, how to behave, what to believe, what to say, what to do, what to know, what not to know. And so our conditioning begins from that very young age. But because we have no concept of ourself, we have no concept of our ego, no concept of our needs, we are simply absorbing everything from everybody else around us, which is then creating a sense of our identity, creating our sense of self, whether it's our true sense or not. We are simply creating it and learning as we go along. And so this automatically starts to fragment the soul further, because at each moment of our conditioning, we are separated from our own true nature. We are learning how to behave and believe and act and do from somebody else, from their interpretation of how we should be. And then, of course, we are exposed to wounding and trauma and more conditioning. And so the wounding and the trauma that we are exposed to, every moment, we become more fragmented. Our soul becomes more fragmented as we become more separated from our deeper knowing and our deeper sense of self, our true self, our authentic self. And so as we begin to grow older, we can start to imagine ourselves as this soul energy which has over time started to become fractured and fragmented. And so what we can start to see is the soul as this jigsaw puzzle. And all the pieces in the jigsaw make up our soul, make up our own unique blueprint, our own nature, our own magic, our own mystery, our true story, the story of our wounding and our traumas, but also our gifts, our strengths, our talents, and all of the soul journey that we are here to complete. But as we look at this jigsaw, we can see that it is a jigsaw. It's a jigsaw that we need to learn how to put back together as we go through life. And so this is what we experience going through life, because fundamentally what we are walking down is to gather all of those fragmented pieces of our soul and to integrate them back into the one soul picture, so that we can fundamentally return back to that source energy, that pure consciousness, that oneness, that unconditional love. And so all of these pieces of this jigsaw, each one creates an illusion of our identity. It creates all of the unconscious patterns that have been created from the wounding, the trauma, and the conditioning that we've been exposed to. It contains all of the triggers and the reactions, the behaviors and the beliefs of who we think that we are, based on that wounding, the trauma, and the conditioning. And so our identity, which has been created throughout that early journey, then continues into adulthood. And this is how we live day in, day out, on that surface level, living and surviving and relating from this fractured place within. And yet, there is always that deep voice, that voice which is full of longing, that we can often hear, that comes through our dreams, that can come through nature, can come through those moments when we feel despair, those moments when we hear that voice calling us back home, calling us to be whole, to remember who we are, to belong not on the outside to all of these different people and places, but to belong on the inside, to become whole. And so many of us have felt this calling. We've heard it coming from the deep. It's that call to be whole. And this is what our soul is saying to us. It's calling us to go back in, to go within deep and reclaim all of those fragmented aspects of our soul, so that we can truly remember who we are, why we are here, and what it is that we came here to do. And each of those fragmented aspects of our soul also contain vital essence. It contains our personal power, our gifts, our strengths, our talents. It contains our ability to love thyself and others unconditionally. It contains our ability to forgive, not to forget, but to forgive with the whole of the heart, not just parts of the heart. And so therefore, the art of becoming whole, of reclaiming the self, is the work of shadow work. Shadow work is about going back into the inner realms and gathering all of those aspects of ourself which have become fragmented, so that we can truly remember who we are. And so my relationship with the fragmented soul really did begin from an early age. As many of you know, I was given up for adoption at the age of 2, and my maternal grandmother stepped in to take care of me and get legal custody of me to save me from a life in care. And while I was brought up in the loving arms of my grandmother, I always felt that there was something missing. I didn't really know my biological mother, and I didn't know my biological father. It was like there was 2 parts of me that weren't there, 2 parts of me that were missing, that would give me some understanding of who I was. And so growing up, this really fed my fire. I wanted to know who I was. Who was I without these parts of myself? Who was I in between these 2 women of the motherline, my grandmother and my biological mother? I always felt that there was this piece of me that would help me to understand the very truth of who I am, help me to see and recognize the totality of myself, if I was able to find these parts of myself. And so my whole life has been this search. This is why I went to university and studied women's studies and a degree in psychology, but no answers were found there. And I read books, and I've done a lot of self-help and self-healing over the years. But it was really the moment that I came to the shamanic path that started to open up this story. The first training that I knew that I had to attend was soul retrieval. There was something about those two words which really spoke to my own soul. And I knew that if I was going to embark on this journey, then this is where it was going to begin. And what was really interesting about this first experience, which was a really intense training, was that when I had my own soul retrieved by somebody else, so somebody else went in, altered their state of consciousness, worked with their own guides to go in and retrieve part of my soul and bring it back into my heart. What was beautiful about this journey was that in her soul flight, in her shamanic journey, she found that part of me on a block of ice, surrounded by water. My 2-year-old self was there alone and crying. She'd been abandoned and left. And so she brought that part of me back. She brought it back and blew this little girl back into my heart. And it was so powerful and so beautiful that it really, really resonated. And I could feel this little girl just coming back home to myself. And in fact, this was part of my fragmented soul. Now, this was a wonderful experience. It was so healing and so powerful. However, what came afterwards really surprised me, because I'd actually gone on this training for my own needs, for my own healing. I really wanted to understand and to have my own soul retrieved. But what I didn't bargain for and what I didn't factor in was that sooner or later, I too would have to step into the role as healer. I too would have to journey beyond the veil to retrieve somebody else's soul, a fragment of somebody else's soul. And it was that moment that really freaked me out. I realized in that moment there was so much responsibility, because here I was about to step into an aspect of my power that filled me with trepidation. I realized how powerful and what the responsibility was of being given permission to go and heal somebody's soul, to heal that fragmented soul. And I didn't take it lightly. I really sat with it, and it was so nerve-wracking because I realized that this was something so powerful to me. When I stepped into it, I opened a door. I opened a door into my own soul, the door of the healer, a door which I never would have imagined was in me. It never occurred to me that I would step into this role as my future, that this was my soul path, that this was my soul journey, and that I was actually remembering something that I brought through from lifetimes. And it was only now that it was time to open the door. And so I did. I stepped into the role of the healer, and I brought back somebody else's soul, a fragmented aspect of their soul. And this changed my life. It completely and utterly changed my life and the course of my life forever. Soul work was something that I just knew. It was something that I knew intuitively. Every single aspect of it, it just made sense to me. And in fact, this was my medicine, soul retrieval, soul work, healing the fragmented soul. And so after many years studying to help me become a practitioner, a shamanic practitioner, I then started my own practice where I would regularly work with my own guides, my own teachers, and my own allies beyond the veil. I would alter my state of consciousness and journey with them into the other realms to find the missing soul parts of the women that would come to visit me. And I would bring them back, these soul parts, with a message, with a song, with healing, with power, and I would blow all that back into the heart of my client. And it was so powerful and so tender that I was really being given permission to do this sacred and holy work. But as time went along, what I started to realize was that Soul retrieval is so powerful. And yet, here I was working in this environment where I felt that not only was I doing good work, but I was also taking some of the power away from the work from the individual. I've started to think to myself, if I can do my own soul retrieval, then surely I can hold space and help other women retrieve parts of their soul, of their fragmented soul. Surely I can hold space for them to go in and experience the power of finding that part of their soul that has been fragmented due to wounding and trauma and conditioning that they've been exposed to. And it was from this inquiry came out the shadow work process. And this was really fundamental in my own development and in my own journey. Because here I was separating myself from that shamanic path. I was going against those shamanic principles of being the healer for others and opening the space and allowing other people to heal themselves. Allowing them to be their own healer, their own teacher, their own therapist. And so that was a really great shift for me, and one that I have never looked back on. Even though I've had my moments, I've never looked back on it because this is my medicine. This is what I bring to the world. And so it was really powerful for me to really hold on to this. And so when we work with healing the fragmented soul, and especially through shadow work, it is about coming back into the body, to be present in the body so that we can experience what was lost through that fragmentation, to experience what we became disconnected from, that created disharmony and dis-ease on the inside, so that we can experience where that internal conflict comes from on the inside, what we've become separated from, what we felt that was missing in our lives. And so the way in which we always begin this is by simply listening. When we do feel disconnected, when we do feel like something is missing, when we do feel internal conflict, it's because there is something missing. It's because there is a disconnection. And therefore, when we bring our attention to this and just listen to what it's saying, we then open ourselves to trust. Trusting in the experience of understanding that yes, something has become disconnected, something is missing. And so when we learn how to listen and trust in this way, we then step into our power. Because it is in our power to go within and reclaim those parts of ourselves that have become lost, separated, that have become hidden. And so in those moments when we have stepped into trust, but through listening, we can then take action. Now that action may come from doing it on our own, from learning the tools, by going to workshops, reading the books, doing our journaling, listening to podcasts, listening to dreams. And we do the work of reclaiming those fragmented aspects of our soul. Or we can work with somebody else. But one thing that I've always understood when we decide to work with somebody else is to always remember that when we work with somebody else to reclaim the lost aspects of our soul, never to give our power away to them, that we enter into a partnership with them because our power is our own. And therefore, what we are asking for is simply their guidance to help us become our own healer, our own teacher, our own therapist. And so let me ask you, where in your life do you feel disconnected? Where in your life do you feel separated? Where in your life do you feel like there is something missing? I invite you to listen to these parts of yourself, to validate what is missing, to validate what is disconnected, to validate what you feel separated from. And then I invite you to sit with these aspects of yourself and feel into the emotions associated with them. And so begins the process of reconnecting and remembering the self. And so begins the process of remembering the soul back home. Are you ready to break free from the ghosts of your past, to live with more freedom and a clear sense of purpose and inner confidence? If so, book a chat with me to explore the potent magic of one-to-one shadow walking sessions at thefeminineprinciple.com.